All right, hi there. So today we're going to do a bunch of gnocchi. Okay, so I'm going to teach you some of my tips and tricks that I've learned through my career and how to make a really good, consistent gnocchi dough. We're going to cover a lot of things from just the basic ingredients. I'm going to talk about potatoes. We're going to use a basic russet potato. We do this because of its starch content. It has a higher starch content and less moisture, which is ideal for making gnocchi. I've also got a couple of sweet potatoes here as well. I am going to give you a variation on a gnocchi recipe using sweet potatoes, just something kind of fun. So we'll do them all together at the same time. Other basic ingredients that you need for these are going to be some good eggs, salt, and all-purpose flour, or if you want to follow along with me, in this case I am doing a double zero Italian flour. It's really good for consistency, really consistent hydration levels in it. So if you're looking to get the same result every time, I find this is kind of better. Okay. So yeah, we got that. Just to kind of go over some of the tools that we'll be using today. I've got a hot oven on. I am preheating it to 425. There are lots of recipes out there. There's different ways to cook the potatoes for your gnocchi. You can boil them, you can steam them, and you can bake them. We're going to bake them today, and I'm going to tell you more about how to do that and why we're doing that and why I believe it yields a better result. We also need a good pot of water ready to go in the background. That's going to be to blanch our gnocchi after we're done making our dough. And then other tools, maybe a whisk, stainless steel bowl, definitely a fine sieve. This is for sifting your flour. Okay. Also going to introduce you to some tools that you maybe haven't seen before. This is called a potato ricer, and what you do is you put your potato in there and you force it through, and it kind of comes out like semi-grated. I'm also going to give you another technique using a hand grater as well. So there's lots of stuff that you can do with this, and most people will have this at home, so that's good. Other requirements: slotted spoon, and definitely some lined baking sheets with parchment paper, things like that to store our gnocchi on. So let's get started. So first things first, we've got the oven preheated to 425. I have it on convection, okay, 425 Fahrenheit. You want to take your potatoes and you want to wash those. Scrub them up nice, make sure there's no dirt on the outside. And so with the russet potatoes, what you're going to do is I just take a fork and just give them a couple of pokes. This is going to help some of the moisture and steam escape from the potato while we're baking it. Now, I was mentioning that a dry potato is ideal for making a good gnocchi dough. So we can kind of help achieve this with a method that some people think, oh wow, that looks kind of wasteful, chef. Like, why do you have so much salt on your tray? So what I did was I took a basic sheet pan, and I made a bed of kosher salt, okay, with a bit of parchment paper. So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna lay those potatoes on the bed of salt. Okay. Now what's gonna happen is as this bakes, you're like, oh wow, is that gonna make it too salty? No, don't worry. That's why we've left the potatoes in their jackets, skins on. It's not going to absorb too much of that salt. In fact, it's kind of going to go the other direction, where the salt is going to absorb a lot of moisture from the potato, which is going to help us keeping those potatoes nice, dry, and fluffy in the baking process. Okay, so we're going to do that with the russets, and we're also going to do the similar thing with the sweets. Okay, so I'm also going to leave them whole, give them a couple of pokes. Now, a completely different starch level in your sweet potato, and two major differences that you'll see in the recipes that I've given you on these two base gnocchi doughs are that the sweet potato gnocchi recipe doesn't have eggs, whereas the russet potato does. Now, the main reason for that is that there is a lot more moisture in these guys than there is in the russet potato. But same principle. I've got another sheet pan here on my salt, and then I'm going to fire both of these into the oven at 425 for about, hopefully it's only going to take about 40 to 45 minutes. And now that those potatoes are in the oven, we can use this time in between to kind of set up the rest of our mise en place for the rest of the recipe. So grab yourself, make sure you have a scale handy. I find that Weighing your ingredients is always going to be a far more accurate way when you're trying to create a consistent recipe. And the reason for that is when you're weighing or measuring things like flour, you might be familiar with the simple, measuring method: 2 cups of flour. And it is what it is. Now, I can guarantee you that if 2 people measure out 2 cups of flour, they might actually vary in weight slightly, and that could be caused either by they just didn't measure it properly, or maybe they packed it a little bit more firm than the other person did, so they have a little bit more weight. And then there's also the whole factor: if you use 2 different flours, not every flour is milled the same or has the same density or weighs the same. So weight is definitely your most accurate way to stay on track. Okay, so the recipe that I've given you for my gnocchi dough, for the basic one. All right, so the weight of the flour in the basic gnocchi recipe is actually, the one that I gave you is 55 grams for the batch, but I'm going to do double that, so I'm going to do 110. I'm going to zero out my scale. Okay, and then just weigh out my 110 grams. Whoop, too much. Go back and forth here. There we go. Set that aside. I'm also going to, I can go ahead and crack 4 eggs. Your recipe is 2. I'm doing double once again. Careful not to get any shell in there. I find your eggs will always work better if they're not stone cold, so let them sit at room temperature for a little while before you go ahead and mix your dough. All right, you grab a whisk and just incorporate those. And then you can set that aside with your flour. For the sweet potato recipe, you might as well go ahead and measure out that flour as well. And this one we're going to just do by the cup method. Now, you're going to find when we get to the mixing of the dough on this recipe, this one's a little bit more by feel. We may have to add a little bit more flour than I have written down in the recipe. And everybody's will be slightly different. It's about getting the right consistency. So we're just going to go with 2 level cups for that one, but nothing else required. No eggs in this recipe. Set that aside. You also want to have extra flour. Okay, time to check the baked potatoes. Pretty good. Now mine took about 55 minutes. This is going to vary depending on size, okay, for you at home. Larger potatoes will just simply take a little longer. So next stage, pull them off the tray. You can dust off any of that excess salt. How do you know the potato's done? You should be able to squish it and it should really kind of like take the imprint of like your finger or your thumb and not bounce back. It shouldn't feel too firm, okay? Now cut them in half to release some steam. This is method 1. This will be using a potato ricer. I'm going to show you how to use that. I'm also going to show you how to do them with a hand grater. The skin should be nice and dry. Look at the inside of the potato. You can tell it's cooked all the way through. They're super hot. Okay, so mind your hands. We're also allowing some of the steam to escape at this point, which is going to really assist us with letting some of the extra moisture out. So remember I said, the drier the potato, the better. Another way to get these ready for your hand grater is going to be to simply grabbing a paring knife. Let's peel off the skin. Now I have asbestos hands, so like I said, be very mindful if you're doing this at home. The skin should come away quite easily from the potato. As you can see, you can wear some gloves, set it down on your cutting board like so. Skin came off relatively effortlessly. I don't know, these are great little snacks. I love that. Now what about all that salt on the pan? Remember we were talking about that? Well, it's okay. Don't let that go to waste. I'm going to show you where you can use that later. Same thing, make a little slit here and peel that skin back. Because these are so hot, it's important to work with them while they're still hot when we're going to put them through the grater and through the ricer. Now while those potatoes are cooling, I'm going to grab out the sweet potatoes as well. Now as you can see here, there's a lot of this like caramelization here coming out of it, and this moisture coming out of all the holes that we poked in the sweet potato. So that's the extra sugar. You can really smell it. It almost smells like kind of like burnt sugar. There's a high sugar content in these sweet potatoes, okay? And also they have so much more moisture in them than the russet potato, and that is where you're going to see a major difference in the recipes. There is in the amount of flour. Where remember, I'm only doing about 110 grams of flour to the 1,400 grams of russet potato, and then on the sweet potato recipe we're going with a full 2 cups of flour, because that much flour is going to be required to absorb that moisture from that potato and balance it out. And we also don't have any egg in this recipe either. I'm just going to set these aside to cool. Alright, so method number 1, we're going to use this potato ricer. So what it is, it's basically like a little press, and there's a little die inside. You get different size dies, different size holes. I'm going to use the medium size one. Okay, and you put the potato in there and you smash it through. So what you want to do is grab a spoon. Open up your ricer. You can just scoop out little bits of the potato without the skin into there. Now, whenever you're using a ricer, the number 1 mistake that people make is they overload it, okay? So don't put too much in there. It'll be easier to push through if you do little bits at a time, okay? Press it through. Out comes your potato. Option 2 is using the box grater. And your potatoes that you left whole, the reason why you leave them whole is it's going to be easier for you to grab here, okay? So place your box grater on the cutting board and then just gently grate it through. Ooh, it's still really hot. Steamy, steamy. I recommend gloves. And then that's what you'll get afterwards. And just scoop all that into your bowl. Just one more here. Don't compact the potato, leave it nice and light and fluffy as you're grating it or ricing it. Now the next step in making the gnocchi, we want to make sure that we have the right weight on the potato. So in your recipe it's 700 grams. I'm doubling it, so I'm going for 1400. You can see it's nice, light, fluffy, okay? Not compact, very important. Do not get in there. Just kind of let it be. It's still pretty warm, okay? I'm just gonna scale out my my bowl here and then see how much potato we actually have. Try to zero that out. Now to make sure that you have the right amount of potato, you know, go ahead and you know, weigh the potatoes beforehand. Now, I'm actually short here. I actually have about 800 grams, so I don't have enough to do the double batch recipe. That's okay. I'll just you know, half my eggs. So I'm just going to cut this back to my 700 grams. See, that's actually how much I have left there, so you know, not too much. And then have a nice clean surface area ready to work. A bench scraper is super useful here, okay, for this. Get your potato out onto the work surface, and then just gently spread it out. Don't mash it, okay? We do not want to get the starch. We don't want to overwork the starches in the potato. This is a key step in yielding a nice, light, fluffy potato gnocchi, okay? Take your egg and just drizzle a little bit of that. Only going half the amount. Then take the flour. So same thing here. I'm gonna half the amount of flour that I use. And give it a light dusting all over that surface area. If you want to add any other, you know, seasonings to your dough, this would be the point to do it. So if you wanted to add a little bit more salt, you could season that here. And now you want to gently incorporate it with your bench scraper. Getting the egg in there, mixing the flour, but without overworking the starches in the potato and without overworking the gluten in the flour, okay? I want to get it to kind of a point where it's kind of a shaggy mess. I'm going to put in a little bit more of my flour. At this point, the dough should be nice temperature, easy to work with your hands, not too hot. If it's far too hot at this point and you try to add the eggs are just going to cook and that's not going to be great. And key to a nice light potato gnocchi is to control the amount of flour you add to your dough to get the right consistency. The more flour you add, the more dense it's going to become. So you always want to have more potato going on than you do flour, okay? With your recipes at home, you may have to adjust this amount. It becomes exercise of feeling. We don't want it to be overly wet. We do want to be able to kind of have it come together and work this into a ball. And gently roll this into a little bit of a ball. The key is not a lot of force. Don't knead it too much. Okay, just kind of rolling it together till it forms a bit of a log. Just a titch more flour here on the top, just to help with the rolling. Cut this into 2 more manageable pieces so you can kind of see what we have going on here. Gnocchi dough. I do like to let my dough rest. Same principle as that I use when making pasta dough. Any work that I have done to the gluten, I want to give it a chance to kind of rest. So you can go ahead and wrap these in saran wrap and let them sit for at least half an hour. You can also put them in the fridge overnight. Do the dough a day in advance, and then move to the next step the next day. Now don't forget bench scraper. That's where it comes in really handy for cleaning up those surfaces and getting those sticky bits off your countertop. Okay. Okay, now it's time to tackle those sweet potatoes. And dust off the salt from the tray. Let's cut these ones in half. This is a completely different feeling than the russet potatoes. They're so wet, okay? Because they're so soft, they don't really require the use of a hand grater. I'll just show you because it just gets really kind of mushy. So it's really hard to grab. Remove the skin. Get our grater in there. Just force it through. Now that'll help you get the best texture, but to be honest, they are so wet that you can pretty much just dice the potato and then mash it together after. So just, you know, peel all the skins back. Okay, like so. Dice them up. Add them in the bowl like that, and then we're just going to mash them with a masher. Just grab like a standard potato masher. Break down those sweet potatoes a bit. Now, because they're not starchy like your other potatoes, you don't have to worry about the over-mixing process on them alone. You do, however, once you add the flour, want to kind of take that into account and try not to get that too worked up, the gluten. Option to add a little cinnamon if you're looking to make a different flavor profile. Okay, a little bit of salt. We've got our 2 cups of flour. I'm going to add in a goodly amount of it first, see where it's at. So you can always add, you can't take away here in this case. And then just gently incorporate. You can transfer this to your nice clean work surface, flat, out of the bowl. Just to work it a little bit further without disrupting all that gluten in the flour, grab that handy dandy bench scraper again, and the same technique as we used in our other gnocchi dough. Just cut through it. Start to get that nice shaggy mess. More flour. And see where it's at. Just grab it with your hands and pretty good. Still a little bit wet, so I want to add just a little bit more flour. I'm going to go with the full 2 cups there. And I had about 750 grams of sweet potato, just for reference. I weighed that out after. Looks pretty good. Time to get at it with my hands. Still pretty wet, so just a little bit more flour. In half. Bit more flour, and I'm just going to roll 2 separate dough balls. And same thing as our other gnocchi, going to set it aside and let it rest. Like there's a goodly amount of excess flour on the surface, but that's okay. Honestly, half an hour from now, you're not going to see that. It's going to get absorbed by all that moisture from the sweet potato. All right, so got my gnocchi dough ready to go here. Okay. Go ahead and make sure that pot of water is on to cook your gnocchi with. And remember where I said don't throw away that salt from the potatoes? That's because we can use this to salt that water in your pasta, okay? No waste. You want to make sure that the water is nicely salted so that you have a nice seasoned gnocchi when you're done cooking it, okay? I'm also going to go ahead and grab a large sheet pan, piece of parchment. I lightly dust it with some flour. I need somewhere to put the gnocchi after I cut it, so that's how we're going to do that. A nice clean work surface, grab a little bit more flour and lightly dust that surface, okay? Let's get into our dough. Make sure you have extra flour on hand for this part. Now using your bench scraper, just cut it into a couple of more manageable pieces. And then continue to roll out. Now, your size, your choice. I'm gonna go about a good, like, fat fingers width on my gnocchi. I like them to be a little bit larger. And go ahead, you can roll them all out in succession like so. Get a good consistent width on them. Okay. And then the fun part, or like one of my favorite parts, is the cutting of the gnocchi. So once again, you know, you choose a size, but cut them into like little, I'm going little 1/2 inch size pillows. Like so. After that, you can go ahead and you can place them onto your sheet pan. It's just so they don't stick together while you're getting your water up and ready to cook them. Okay. Go ahead and cut this guy here. Same thing. Now I don't have a gnocchi board, but a gnocchi board is like a little wooden board with ridges on it, and that's actually used to put texture on the pasta. You can simply use the back of a fork if you'd like to do this, and just take each one and just gently roll it down like so. So you get little ridges like this. Now the purpose of the ridges is to help collect sauce. Help it stick to the pasta. They don't have to be this perfect little pillow shape. You can, give kind of a rustic uniqueness by adding this and pinching it in there like that with your fork. So I went ahead and formed all of those. You can see I did some on this side of the pan are all textured with the fork, and these ones are just left in the pillow. So I'm going to set those aside while the water comes up, and then let's mess around with that sweet potato dough and see what that looks like. Take a good look at our sweet potato dough here. Still got a good amount of flour on my surface. Same process. I'm going to roll into some logs. This one is very, very soft. And because they're so soft, option to shape might not be quite as easy. However, still doable. Okay. All right, time to par blanch the gnocchi. So I've got water here into a nice rolling boil. Make sure that it's salted, has a good level of salt. You want the gnocchi to absorb some of that, so you don't have to do too much seasoning at the end. On an extra sheet pan, just have ready, like lightly greased, a little bit of olive oil. We're gonna need somewhere to put that gnocchi when it's ready to come out. It doesn't take long to cook your gnocchi. Okay. We'll start with our potato. What you want to do is grab them off your tray and just drop them in there. I'm going to turn my heat down just slightly. It doesn't have to be a crazy rolling boil during the cooking process, okay? Make sure you have enough water in your pot, a big enough pot, you know, for the amount of gnocchi that you're making. There's no need to stir the pot. Just kind of let it be. Do it in small increments because you don't want to overload the pot, and you also want to pay attention to how much you're cooking the gnocchi. Okay? Now you're going to get a little bit of foam here. Just going to give the pot just a gentle little stir. But what you're waiting for here is about 30 to 45 seconds, probably no more than a minute. The gnocchi should start to rise to the surface, and once they float to the top, that's how you know that they're done. And there comes one. So, and they should do that in the order that they went in. So once they come to the top, using your slotted spoon, get rid of that extra moisture, onto the tray. Oh, here they come. Once you have these all trayed up and cooled down, you can store them in your fridge for 3 or 4 days. You also have an option to leave them spread out on the tray and pop them in your freezer if you have room. And you can IQF or individually quick freeze the gnocchi at this stage. Okay, and then it's just as simple as pulling them from your freezer, letting them defrost, and I will show you a couple of quick cooking techniques later. But before then, I gotta get the rest of this gnocchi going here. Alright, so the plain potato gnocchi is cooked. Now time to exact same routine for the sweet potato. Just gonna cook them until they float. Well, one lone sweet potato gnocchi's come to the top. Now these have taken a little bit longer than the other ones. Now that's because they are more dense. There's far more moisture in them, so they just take a little bit longer to cook, okay? It's more like 2 minutes. Oh, comes the next one. There we go, but they've held their shape nicely. And that's the resident German Shepherd. You haven't met him yet. Kobe, quiet. There you go, and just nice bright color on those. Quite happy. Texture seems nice and firm. I'm just gonna take the rest of these off and then yeah, set all these aside for dinner, and I'll have to share another video with you. Next video will be, how to actually cook and prepare a couple of dishes using the pasta.